Welcome to Something to Say, where we bring voices from diverse backgrounds who will share their unique stories and perspectives on finding their passion and provide insights on how you can find yours. Join us as host Greg DeShields guides us through this enlightening journey.
Welcome to episode 4 of Something to Say podcasts, a unique platform that amplifies the voices of individuals from diverse backgrounds sharing their passions. I'm your host, Greg DeShields, and I'm excited to bring you another episode of Something to Say. Thank you for joining us. But before we dive into today's conversation with our very interesting guest, I'd like to share a few updates. The official Something to Say podcast website was launched last week. It's entitled Something to Say with gregdeshields.com. Please visit the site. There's a lot of great information that you'll probably want to review. Secondly, I'd like to thank our listeners. In just a few short weeks, we've had over 500 downloads. That's pretty amazing. So thank you all for listening. And then lastly, we are featured on the Alive Podcast Network. The Alive Podcast Network is home for hundreds of Black podcast episodes. So today we welcome Carl Lorenzo McIver. He is a Global Chief Creative Officer at Red Bloodless Medicine and Surgery. And I know you're probably trying to figure out what is Red Bloodless Medicine and Surgery. And I'm sure by the time this episode is over, Carl is going to educate all of us. But let me take a little bit of a stab at this. Bloodless medicine and surgery is a safe, proven, and effective method of treating patients without using blood or blood products, such as red cells, white cells, platelets, and plasma. Now, once again, I'm not the expert. Carl is. And I'm sure as we go through today's episode, he'll actually help you understand why this is really important to you. With over 20 years of expertise in creative direction, advertising, branding, film directing, and producing, Carl carved out a niche as a visionary in transforming health-focused brand identities. Recognized by Google search as a top global influencer in anemia and patient blood management. His recent 4-year journey has been dedicated to pioneering initiatives that spotlight critical health challenges, specifically raising awareness of anemia in younger female teens and adults and addressing the pervasive issue of burnout. As Chief Branding Creative Officer, his mission extends beyond traditional marketing, championing a purpose-driven narrative at the heart of the strategy. Carl's role has evolved into not only highlight the innovative thinking bloodless approach in medicine, but also to advocate for a redefined nursing ecosystem, elevating the global respect and opportunity for nurses. Certified in enterprise design thinking and non-fungible tokens, Carl's designs are user-centric, innovative solutions that challenge the status quo and advances healthcare. Carl is a graduate of Pratt Institute in Utica, New York, and resides in Connecticut. So let me just start off by saying it has been a long time coming. I am so glad that you are here, Carl. I am so ready to dive into it. So how about you?
Ray, can you send a copy of that to my wife? Well, I don't know if I can live up to everything you said, but I try. First I want to thank you. And I want to be transparent because during COVID, I started out this process of just about everything you were able to lament. And you were one of very few during COVID that took time out to have a meeting with my team. And we appreciated that. And sometimes we don't give enough credit to people that take time out. And you didn't have to. You really did. You had a busy agenda, but you were willing to take time out and chat with us. And to this day, I truly appreciate that. And I appreciate anyone that took time out, especially on my LinkedIn, where I had very few connections. Mm-hmm. They were just looking at someone that just wanted a chat. And sometimes you need that. So, I appreciate that. And all the nurses, many of the nurses took time out to whether encourage me or keep me going. So you are in that wonderful team, and I definitely want to thank you.
Well, I just want to let you know this is really the power of LinkedIn, because it's been interesting for as long as I've known you. It's been primarily through LinkedIn, but I think we're getting closer to actually meeting in person. We're actually doing a podcast as opposed to our messages. But I also want to point out to you, your creative approach to design was amongst the things that really drew me in. So a lot of what we kind of described about you in terms of that area of expertise is without any doubt very realistic, and I appreciate it. I'm so glad you're here today. So as you know, you are not just an interesting person, but quite honestly, you have a really interesting job. And I think maybe what we should do first is just learn about you as an interesting person. So here on Something to Say, we like to begin with 3 get to know you questions to kind of share some insights about you with our audience. So I have 3 questions for you. We'll start with the easy ones and work a little bit harder as we go along. So your first question is, if you could have dinner with any historical figure, who would that be and why?
Oh, definitely Jesus. And here's why. I know many would think that that dinner would be obviously a religious engagement, but just imagine the opportunity to meet someone that's perfect, that's willing to not only with perfection, but willing to offer their life for others. So just those 2 components alone, I would learn humility and I would learn compassion. So that would be an incredible dinner. And I don't know what we would eat, but that would be incredible.
So you know what, though, over the years that I've done this podcast and I've asked that question, I think you're maybe the 4th or the 5th person who said Jesus. And there was one individual who was really woven into her faith-based community. And when she said it, she said, I just don't know if you think I'm going to get too churchy. And I was like, no, it was a great response. I mean, she gave some really interesting insights. So kudos for you for making that acknowledgement. And yes, I'm very curious what dinner would probably be. All right, so the second one is, if you could eliminate one thing from your daily routine, what would that be and why?
That's a good question. Now, this is going to sound odd, but I would eliminate some of the creative process. Now, I know that sounds contradictory, but it does take a lot of work, to come up with ideas. And sometimes those ideas take place 3 in the morning, and I have to wake up and I have to start, developing. So I don't get the sleep that I would love, nor do I get the exercise that I would like as well. And although I do a lot of volunteer work, still the creative process, I've been able to do it much faster because of the years doing it. But still, I would like to limit it a little bit.
Um, well, they say you're supposed to keep a notepad beside the bed for those 3 in the morning, like brainstorms. So it might be a tool that you want to add
I'll
to
try that.
it. All right, so your third question is, if you had to teach a class on just one thing, what would you teach?
Good question. Good question. Good question. Now, once again, it would be twofold. If that's a personal question, it would just have people really look into the Bible, and I'm one of Jehovah's Witnesses, so a lot of volunteer work is centered around my life. So I would love that for people to really hone in and study how that could be able to help their lives. On the secular end, I would love to teach, and I hate the word teach, but I would love to collaborate and understand and sort of share ideas on engagement, true marketing, true design, because sadly, with the internet, it's opened up a host of opportunities. But the problem is, with the host of opportunities comes a lot of people that really would benefit from good design principles, good engagement principles, and good marketing principles.
Well, so it sounds like that would be a end of the semester class so that there would have been some pre-work or some advanced preparation for students. But you're right. There's so many entrepreneurial endeavors that are requiring people to do their own creative design that a course like that could certainly be benefited in being presented the way you describe it. So fantastic. So you've answered our three questions. Now, I know you've been extremely busy doing both interviews as well as being published around bloodless medicine and surgery. And I think it probably is appropriate for us to maybe move a little bit closer to that space and for you to maybe answer a few questions around the healthcare industry. Now, these are very broad, so we give you a little bit of a 4-lane highway or 3-lane highway, but the first is, what is a substantial trend that you can share regarding the healthcare industry?
That's a good question. That's a good question. Here is the challenge with the healthcare industry and other industries. And I can say this because I've worked in the healthcare industry quite a number of decades. I've designed for many of the most popular hospitals, most of them in New York City and others in the United States. Healthcare, healthcare sadly doesn't respond to trends. Now, that is a blessing and a curse. Because when you don't respond to trends, you don't navigate as quickly, which means you lose that ability to have focus or to have engagement with your intended audience, which is the public. One of the reasons why I developed red bloodless medicine surgery was just because of that. I wanted to be quick to navigate towards a trend, so quick that it really shows a sense of understanding what the market is asking for, rather than telling them what they need to know. That's a whole different conversation. And I think people appreciate more when you are willing to go out to meet them halfway, rather than you going to the full bridge and giving them what we think that they deserve.
You know, I think you bring up such a good point in terms of that ability to respond, especially when trends happen, as we kind of reflect back on COVID, how we were really slow to kind of, approach that in a way that we could get ahead of it. Obviously, it was a pretty dramatic set of circumstances, but I think if we kind of, use your example and kind of apply it to that, I can see what you mean by if you're not really responding to trends in the way that you should, it can certainly become problematic for you, especially in the healthcare space. So the second question is, what kind of concern is it that you see that really is, without any doubt, woven into the healthcare industry that we should all be aware of?
Excellent question. That goes back to your first trend.
Hmm.
We're dealing with, let's take the first one that's very large scale for me, anemia. So many, sad to say, whether it's women, young women, seniors, are dealing with the symptoms and don't realize that they are anemic. And this plays its way right into the work environment, corporate environment, travel. I think we had a discussion regarding that on travel. Many of the people, many of the workers are probably dealing with anemia and don't realize it because the awareness has not been granted to them. So here's a trend that we need to identify that sometimes we're skipping over. Burnout. Burnout, I'm glad you mentioned that. Burnout is a recent, not that it is a recent trend, I would say that because of COVID. COVID developed a paradigm shift, and in that paradigm shift, there were new situations that we have to counter, new terminologies we have to develop, new ways of working, new environments. All these are things that new that we had never dealt with before. So A, do we skip over them, or do we find a way to be able to address those situations and develop new ideas? So when you think of trends, we're in the trend. We're in the trend. So healthcare can either adapt or can stay the way it had been in the past and just wish that it hits all those types of points that the consumer patient would like to call accepts. Now we're talking about patient experience. And we talked about patient experience maybe 20 years ago? No. because now patient experience is very important. How does that patient feel when they enter into this whole gamut of healthcare?
So,
So they, I'm sorry.
no, I was going to say it's interesting how you have really identified that issue of concern around lack of knowledge and this idea of anemia, and especially thinking in terms of the tourism or in the travel industry. It's such an intense, fast-paced, 24/7 industry that many might be navigating difficult work environments and be anemic and not realize that part of the reason that they can't be as successful as they like is because of the anemia which they struggle with on their own. So, and I know you're going to talk about that as we go a little bit further, but I wanted to maybe just kind of get a sense of origin around all of this. So, when was the moment of realization when you felt that this should really be something that you focus on?
You know, since I was a child, I would never accept blood for personal reasons. And I knew that there was a stigma attached, unfair. But as I grew older in my, let's see, in the 20s and the 30s, I started to realize that the healthcare field adapted. They were willing to make concessions and develop innovation just around groups that did not want blood for whatever reason. So about, I'd say 5 years, once again, sleeping and dreaming, something hit me. I said, wait a minute. Now, would it be fair for a group, whether it's a religious group or any group, to have the healthcare industry just develop protocols just for them and not be willing to share it with the general population? And we all know that when it comes to just the conversation of bloodless, Jehovah's Witnesses would, be the persons that would come to mind. So with that being said, and being one of them, I understood, both sides of the table. So then I said, wait a minute, here, this is such a wonderful opportunity for people, whether they have a religious background or what have you, to be able to learn about what the healthcare field is doing. But first I have to get rid of the stigma. So most of my marketing was really just to clear the stigma, clear the plate, get on a tarmac and start taking off. And to a certain degree, and this was before COVID. When COVID hit, then a whole different situation started to evolve. I realized from the very beginning that donated blood would literally be in critical levels. You had to think about that because think about it, before COVID, they still needed blood. COVID hits, no one's donating. We go into what, 2, 3, 4 years. Think about what the storage would be. Now, after COVID, now you're concerned about the quality. So once again, I'm not here to educate someone on taking blood or not. Red basically is, I'd say, a marketing bridge to help people, to help manufacturers, to help associations to be able to cross over bridge so that they can be able to have an open dialogue and engage with the public. That's what Red is really about.
But from the perspective, and I think I mentioned earlier in your introduction about why it's important to those who might be listening to this podcast. So if we kind of whittle it down to, what is a more immediate decision, what predicament would I be in where this would be applicable and I'd want to pay attention to it? Is it if I was in a horrible car accident, or is it based on me having a certain type of elective surgery? So how would I apply the insights that I'm probably going to be getting from you in terms of education to a definitive point in time when I should be aware and apply this knowledge?
Good question. In the past, it was always looked at as a life or death situation when you spoke of bloodless. But now that hospitals and medical centers, manufacturers have developed so many types of techniques, protocols, that decision is now less critical. Now, I'm not saying there aren't some critical decisions, they are, but it's up to you to decide what your barometer is, where you want to say, you know what, I want to stay without whole blood product and I want to see what the outcomes are. Now, here's the thing. In the past, we would look at the situation as it comes. You walk into the ER, now you have to make that decision. Red is saying, why make the decision as soon as you enter the ER? Why not work on anemia, iron deficiency way early on in the process? Why not let people understand if they build up their blood that they may not have to make the critical decisions when they're in the ER to the OR? And think about this for a second. How many individuals you know offhand are in car accidents where they're life and death? Probably very few. Most of our decisions are elective surgery, or we may have a procedure that may not be life-threatening. So the question is, why opt for blood if there are other opportunities? See why? I never understood that whole rationale. You walk into a hospital and you have to tell them and show a card, no blood, no blood. Why? You know, if my son had allergies and we went into a restaurant and I said to the owners, my son has peanut allergies, I would hope they would welcome doing whatever they could so he would still eat. Not confront him, well, why do you have those allergies? We're going to give you peanuts anyway, and you have to prove to us that your allergies are going to make you sick. So it's nuts. So Red is basically just saying, let's stop for a second. Let's stop for a second. Let's begin to appreciate each other. Your no is not a rejection, it's just no. So let's work together. That's what that whole concept is.
So if I can see how the passion that you have would certainly translate over into that. So because we are something to say, we also like to leave a little space to say to anybody who is a guest on our podcast, you know, what is it that you'd like to say?
That's a good question. I don't think everyone's asked that. Now I'm blank. Here's what I like to say. Our goal is not competitive. Our goal is really to bring a bridge where a person can be able to say no to something and it not be frowned upon, where a person doesn't have to feel a level of intimidation, where a person doesn't have to feel a level of embarrassment, where a person can walk into a hospital and say, you know, for whatever reason, I wish not to entertain blood. And that the hospital says, welcome, we're here for you. Wow. That's all we're asking.
Well, it really underscores that statement about, you know, patients' rights. And to that degree, the smarter a patient is, the more they can really lean into emphasizing or requesting things that are in their best healthcare decisions. So listen, I want to thank you for joining us today. Like I said, it's been a while that we have been coordinating our ability to get together and actually speak on a single issue. But every time I talk to you, I get smarter on this issue. So I want to thank you for not just sharing what your passion is about it, but also your insights, because I feel that red bloodless medicine and surgery is something that provides a great deal of information that perhaps is either the starting point for some or bridges a gap for some, as you've talked about. So it's really been a pleasure to have you on our show. I could give you one last word. Is there some other additional thought that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I want to thank you. You know, and I think people take forums like this for granted. I know, because I know forums like this, you know, you either understand what we're doing or you want to understand better what we're doing. And that's all we ask, you know. And I appreciate you allowing us this forum, because this forum does help. Everything helps. You know, we never turn down opportunities to be able to reach a target market. And if we reach one, isn't that great?
It is. And I will give you, without any doubt, a huge shout out, because for me, as I wanted to understand this as well as I could, being put in a position to do the podcast made me think about that, and to be able to do that in like 26 minutes. So Carl, once again, thank you so much for being able to be our guest today. And for those of you who are in our audience, that's a wrap for the 4th episode of Something to Say. Stay tuned for more inspiring conversations with voices of individuals from diverse backgrounds sharing their passions. So until next time, this is Greg DeShields signing off.
Thank you for tuning in to Something to Say. We trust you found some valuable insights and takeaways that can help you find your passion. Don't miss out on future episodes. Please subscribe, rate, and review us on your preferred platform. We value your feedback and suggestions, so let us know how we can serve you better. Keep the conversation going and stay inspired until we meet again. Take care and happy listening.